Hey everybody, this is Tim with the University of Vinyl. This is my second video. Today I'm going to do a contest response for Michael from the channel Archived and Noted. Michael has been in the VC for a little over a year now, and he is celebrating 500 subs to his channel. I actually think he's closer to about 700 since he announced this contest a couple weeks ago. But anyway, this is designed to kind of showcase other people's collections. I'm happy to participate and ready to roll. Here we go. So question number one from Michael is: show an unexpected record you discovered, either a blind buy or something you've never heard of before, that blew you away. My answer is the solo debut album from Emmett Rhodes. Emmett Rhodes was kind of an enigma. He played every instrument, wrote this entire album. Emmett Rhodes actually died last summer. I had never heard of him, to be honest, until he passed away. I think it was in July, died in his sleep, age 70. But the guy was kind of an enigma, as I had mentioned. He put out 3 albums in pretty quick succession, really finely crafted power pop, very tuneful, great music. He had this album in 1970. He had a follow-up in 71. And another album in 1973, and at that point in time he kind of disappeared. I think the record label dropped him and some bad luck. He really wasn't heard of from, again, in the music industry until I don't know, I want to say 2004, 2005. He eventually put out another album in 2016. Couple members of the Bangles and a couple other indie rockers kind of helped to push him along, rehabilitate him. But the story back to this original album, this came out on ABC Dunhill. It is a first pressing. I think it's a little bit hard to find. I picked it up on eBay. I think it was in August last year. Never heard Emmett Rhodes before. He's kind of a little bit spotty on Spotify, pardon me. But there's a little bit of stuff you can find on Spotify. This is very much in the vein of Big Star. You can actually, you can almost mistake his voice for early 1969, 1970, 1971 Paul McCartney. Very talented guy. The word is that he got a $5,000 advance from the label to do this album, and he went ahead and built out a home studio in his parents' garage. And as far as I know, he was living there as well. But kind of a recluse, a little bit of a tragic figure. He did have a little late career comeback in 2016, but this is just a great album. Standout tracks: With the Face on My Floor, Promises I've Made, Lullaby. I think Lullaby showed up on one of, I think it was the Royal Tenenbaum soundtrack by Wes Anderson. And everybody knows that Wes has got great taste in music. So this was a new find for me. I'd never heard of him before he passed away, unfortunately, and really enjoyed it. Great record. Question number 2. I've got a little cheat sheet here. Show 2 albums with the greatest polarity, widest expanse of genres in your collection. I had to do a little digging on this to kind of find 2 different extreme examples, but this is what I came up with. I've got Willie Nelson, Stardust. Arguably, this is the best that Willie has ever sounded on an album. You know, the Great American Songbook, American Standards, Jimmy Webb songs, Georgia on My Mind. What else was, you know, there's a bunch of classic songs on here. All of Me, Stardust, of course, Unchained Melody, Lush production. You know, this came out in the late 70s. I actually have this pressing that's been derided on the Steve Hoffman forums. Consensus is they don't think it's that great. This is the CBS Master Sound, half mastered edition. It sounds good to me. And I found it in the dollar bin. I'm happy with it. So there you have it, Willie Nelson, Stardust on one end of the spectrum. On the other side, we're going to go a whole different direction. Husker Du, Flip Your Wig. This came out in 1985 on SST Records. Bob Mould, Grant Hart, Greg Norton, Power Trio from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. Legendary group, fantastic group. This was the final album that was released on SST before they signed with Warner Brothers. And this is regarded amongst Husker Du files as it's between this and Zen Arcade as to the Phoenix of Husker Du. The cool thing about this album is SST and their in-house producer Spot. You know, SST was fronted by Greg Ginn of Black Flag, and they had an in-house producer Spot. SST recordings are notoriously muddy, drums not really well recorded, you know, proper mic up as far as the recording goes, kind of unheard of. Basically, you know, studio time was hard to come by and expensive, and most bands cranked out an album in a matter of days. But with this album, Husker Du convinced SST to let them self-produce this album, and somehow they were able to work on this for 4 months, which is the longest they had ever worked on an album. This was their 4th album that had been released. There are some incredible songs on this. Flip Your Wig, Makes No Sense at All. That's a classic Bob Mould track. Green Eyes, really good, strong song from Grant Hart. On side 2, we've got Flexible Flyer and Private Plane that I love. Very, very different than Stardust and Willie Nelson, the other end of the spectrum. Flip Your Wig, 1985, SST Records, Husker Du. Show an album you might be embarrassed to own, but you don't care, you love it. I have a few of those in my collection, unfortunately, or fortunately. There he is, the man of the hour, Rupert Holmes. Pursuit of Happiness. Everybody knows Rupert Holmes from Escape, the Pina Colada song. I won't sing it for you. Rupert Holmes is kind of a Renaissance man. He put together some very, very finely crafted pop albums in the early to mid to late 70s. Eventually became a playwright. He had a TV series that he was the showrunner for as well. He's done a little bit of everything, although he hasn't put an album out in decades. After the Pina Colada song album, I think he had 2 or 3 more as part of that record deal, and hasn't really put out anything since. I think he put out a box set. The This is just cheesy enough to be pleasurable, tongue-in-cheek. You kind of get where he's going here, a little bit of a loungy act. You know, look at the cover, the English paneled lounge with the fireplace. He's got the smoking jacket on. He's definitely painting the story. Two standout tracks on this album that I love, that kind of take this a little bit further. Let's Get Crazy Tonight, and track 2, side 2, Bedside Companions. Rupert Holmes. Okay, show your most listened to album in your collection, either recently or all time. I'm going to go with all time, and somewhat related to Husker Du, Bob Mould, Workbook. Came out in the spring of 1989. I have the 25th anniversary pressing. They took this album and put it across two 33 RPM, 180 gram. Really nice pressing. This sounds fantastic. Bob Mould, co-founder of Husker Du. The story with Workbook is Husker Du disintegrated in 1987, 1988. And they were on their final tour behind their final studio album, which was a double LP, Warehouse Songs and Stories. Another fantastic album. I've got a Record Store Day double colored vinyl on this album. Anyway, they were on tour, and they actually had to bring that tour to a close. Grant Hart was strung out. Word is it was heroin. And Bob Mould had been relatively newly sober, had stopped drinking, everything. And he and Grant Hart were butting heads. So the last couple of years that they were working together, it just was not working out. It kind of came to a head during that Warehouse tour. And that was the end of Husker Du. They didn't get back together. They never got back together. Bob and Grant appeared on stage at a charity concert in Minneapolis. I think it was, I want to say 2004. And they hardly looked at each other, and they played. Each of them played one of their own songs as Husker Du. Famously, Grant and Bob were the co-writers, but kind of like Lennon and McCartney, they each had their own compositions, and they flip-flopped. One song was Mould, the next was Hart. It came to be where Mould actually had, 7 out of the 12 tracks on an album at one point. And he was looking to kind of take the band, into a little more modern sound. That's what the theory is. Wanted to take a little more control, and Grant Hart just wasn't having it and was kind of screwing around, drug problems, and that was the end. Bob, after Husker Du imploded, he bought a house, a farmhouse, upstate Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes. Kind of holed up in there, workshopped, taught himself different techniques on acoustic guitar. Mould was famous for the Flying V electric buzzsaw guitar that he had, that churning guitar on all those Husker albums. And this thing was a real departure. There he is right there. Very spare, very acoustic, folk-based. The lead track is called Sunspots. It is a 12-string guitar instrumental, beautiful song. The big hit on this album was See a Little Light, college radio hit. In the spring of '89, when this came out, I was in Chicago, Illinois. This was pre-internet days, of course. I was a subscriber to Rolling Stone magazine. Chicago had a famous, still does, although, you know, not what it used to be. The Chicago Reader, the independent newspaper, came out every Thursday evening. You know, multi-section, big, you know, independent newspaper with a huge music section, record reviews, gig announcements, club postings, all that kind of stuff. And also, Chicago is famous for one of the biggest indie rock stations in the Midwest, WXRT. They played the hell out of See a Little Light. So I listened to that channel quite a bit, that station, and kept on hearing that song, and made my way down to my favorite record store at the time, which was See Hear Music in the Old Town neighborhood of Chicago, right around the intersection of North and Wells. Unfortunately, See Hear is gone now. I think there's a Subway shop there in that old space. But those were fun times. Great times of my life. I had a couple different stints in Chicago, one of my favorite cities in the world. And Bob Mould is one of my favorite artists. Okay. Last question for this contest today. Who was the first VC channel or VC personality that you kind of stumbled across? And most recently, what's your most recent channel that you have subscribed to? I ran across a guy named Ron Beaudry, aka Rockin' Ronnie. Ron is still active. He puts out a lot of videos. He's a Canadian guy. I think he's based in Florida now. And geez, I learned so much watching some of his videos on all the different audiophile pressings, variants. I'd never heard of Classic Records before, the label Classic Records, now defunct. But Ron would showcase all of his Led Zeppelin Classic Records pressings that he had, and he would A/B those against the originals, and still does a lot of that on his channel. Highly recommended. I'll put it down below in the comments. My most recent subscription, guy by the name of Nick Rudow, R-U-D-O-W. I'm going to link him as well. He's just getting started. I think he's got under a dozen videos, but very entertaining, very energetic, very enthusiastic. He's got a wide span of taste of what he likes. Everything from mo-fi pressings to jazz, to rock. He's highly recommended. That's video number 2. University of Vinyl. My name is Tim. I'm in Colorado. I would love to have you subscribe. I do plan on doing more of these. One more time, shout out. Thanks, Michael, from Noted and Archived. I'm going to link his channel up, of course. You got to check that out if you haven't seen it. He has some amazing stuff, and I'm very jealous of his California Light that he has in that room. Hey, take care, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks.